Welcome to the 7th part of the Gloomwood inventory tutorial. In this part, we're going to go over making our basic interaction. So we're going to make a brand new component, and this component is only going to be used on the player character. And what this component is going to be called is a handler, and that's what it's going to do. It's going to allow us to display our mouse when we press tab to open an inventory, and it will allow us to hover items, click items, and eventually move them. But in this part, we're just going to focus on getting that basic interaction going, adding the inputs, and in the next part, we'll add the moving, the rotating, and all the logic to replace the items, move them across inventories. First thing we're going to do is we are going to create our new inputs. So inside of our Gloomwood, we're going to look for inputs. We're going to right click. We're going to make two inputs. So input action, we'll call IA drag. And we'll make another one for IA rotate. So right click again, input action, IA rotate. So both of these are here. So we don't need to do anything with them, but we will add information here in our IMC interaction. So we don't want to do this in here. And the reason we don't want to do it in our interaction is because right now our interaction is used to handle this. It's used to handle our pickup item. Because these are on separate components, we want to keep them split. So because our pickup is on our interact component and this is going to be on our handler component, we'll make it two different input mapping contexts in the event that you want to just cut off the inventory and keep the interaction. Right click into inputs, input mapping, IMC, and we'll call this inventory. Open it up, and actually remember we do need another one here, so duplicate the pickup and call it IA underscore open inventory. And just double click on inventory, add one input for IA drag, a second one for IA rotate, not like that, rotate, and a last one for IA underscore open inventory. So for the inputs, we'll do R for rotate, left click for drag, and for inventory, we'll put E. Not E, we can't use that, so we'll just do tab, we'll be fine. So close the IMC, and let's create our new handler, our new component. So in our blueprints, right click, blueprint class, actor component, AC handler, not like that, handler. There we go. So inside our handler, we're going to start off with our test that it's working. So just put a print here, and to make sure it's working, so we want to go to our world settings, and normally by default, we should have a game mode. There we go. So we have our third person game mode. Search for our default pawn right here. And so it's our third person character in our case. So we want to open our assets in the content browser, double click on it. And so we have our interact, we have our inventory, and now we want to add our handler. So right here, our handler will appear, compile, and now if we play, we should have hello. Okay, so it is working. We have a handler. We can now close this. We don't need it anymore. Just like with our interact, the first thing we need to do is we need to add our inputs. So we're going to get our player controller. We're going to check if it is valid, because this component may not be attached to a player, and honestly, it should always be. So, but this might be a bit redundant, but it's good practice. So look for enhanced input local player subsystem. Add mapping context, and there we go. So the context we're looking for is our IMC inventory right here, and that'll do it for our begin play. Now to check if this works, let's add our IA underscore open inventory. Let's add our IA underscore drag and our IA rotate, and we're just going to put a print on all of them for now. We'll use the start. We're not going to use the triggered. So let's just give these a bit of space. So on start, print, and print open. On drag, we're going to do the same thing. Print on started, make sure, and say drag. And for the last one, it will be rotate. So print and type in rotate. There we go. So these three, if we play and we press tab, we get open. If we press left click, we get drag, and if we press R, we get rotate. So our inputs are working correctly, and we can move on to the next step here. So the next thing we're going to do, although this is going to be changed a bit later, is we want to start by making it possible to activate our inventory. In this part, we're not going to handle the opening of the briefcase. I think we'll do that in the next one. In this one, we're just going to make it so we can test our different inputs on the items themselves. So what we're going to do is we're going to create 2 custom events here. So custom event, call it CE for custom event underscore open UI. Now with open UI, what we want is we want to get our player controller again. So get player controller. And with the player controller, we're just going to change its input modes. We're going to show the mouse cursor and just typically what you have when the UI opens. So search for set input to game and UI. And the reason we use game and UI is because our inputs are going to be handled here. So typically if you have a widget, you could in the widget look for a key pressed. But because we're using multiple widgets, it could get annoying. And especially we're not focusing them. And I'm not sure if you can focus world widgets, but either way, it's easier to have it all here because then there's not multiple ones and we don't have to give one like a master kind of control so that it's the only one that triggers events. So it adds extra steps for nothing, whereas we're trying to have everything be controlled from this handler anyway. That's the whole point of having it. So we set our inputs here to game and UI so that we can call our triggers here, but also any UI triggers, hovering the UI and such. So right here, we're going to add a reroute node and just line this up. We're going to say show mouse cursor, set, and set it to true because we want to be able to see our cursor now. And one other thing we can do is, and this is normally something that you don't typically see because these two are the usual stuff you just see in tutorials. We can also call something called the flags. And I believe they're called flags, at least if I'm not incorrect. Yeah, so they're based on what we call flags here. And this function here is to do the inverse. It's called reset ignore input flags. So what this does is it allows us to say set ignore inputs, for instance. And what this means is now whenever we try and move our mouse and look around, it won't let us. So if we say set ignore look inputs right here, put it to true, and we then call another reroute and say set ignore look input. What this will do is it will make it so that when we call this function, we'll be in UI and we'll be able to input our games, but it will ignore any kind of WASD and mouse movement that would actually normally control the camera or the character's movement. And so now that we have this opening, we need to do the close. So we're going to say CE underscore, or custom event, sorry, we need a new one, CE underscore close UI. And this isn't handling any, obviously, any inventory, any UI widgets because we don't have any, we don't need any for this. So once again, copy our player controller, put it at the bottom here. This time, set input to game only. Now, I will mention this here. If you are using in your game, if you're doing this on your own project and you do have the game in UI and, in game and UI only by default, then you don't want to do this, obviously, because you want to just leave it as this. You don't even need this either. But in our case, we are in game only, and then we want to have UI as well. So we do it this way. We're going to hide the mouse cursor, so reroutes and set mouse cursor here. And it's going to be false in this case because we want it to be hidden. And finally, we want to say reroute, and we're going to say reset ignore input flags. And this one is general, whereas this one is for look and move. They're separate, but this one is specifically for both of them. So we'll just reset the two. So if we now compile this, we don't have anything. If we just run this in, let's say, our open inventory, so we'll just do a flip-flop here. And with the flip-flop, we'll say on true, we're going to open UI. On false, or on B, we're going to close the UI. So compile and save, and let's play this. If we press tab, our cursor should appear. And if we drag, like right now, normally you can have a case, normally if you show your UI and you drag here, you move your mouse while clicking, it will actually turn the camera. But it doesn't seem to handle for movement inputs. And I forget the checkbox? No, I didn't. Okay. I just realized I actually put ignore look and ignore look twice. That's useless. So set ignore move is what we're looking for. And put it to true, and that should hopefully fix the little issue we had there. So if we try again, play, tab, if we drag it doesn't move, with WASD it doesn't move either. Spacebar does work though, just be aware of that, it just doesn't allow you to move. And so, as you can see, the mouse is visible. If we press tab again, it resets back, we can move around no problem. So, that does it. Because the reason we need to do this, just so you're aware, is because right now, with this now set up, we can now look at interacting here, because before we had no mouse cursor, now we do. So if we press tab, we can actually look at it and try and interact. So just like this. So to move on to that interaction part. So for now, we'll leave this just like this for now. We'll be changing it in the next part. So this is what we want to look at, but the thing is, this doesn't work by itself because that's just when we press. We need to actually use the event tick here, because there is no, at least to my knowledge, other way to do this. We could do this with a timer, but the event tick works fine because it's only used on one item, so it's not going to cause any lag and it's not doing anything too complicated. So let's just move these. But you know what, we'll leave these here. We'll move our inventory here, our open inventory, and we're just going to move these two down a bit, and we'll handle those in a second. Okay. So the next thing we actually need is our event tick, as we mentioned. So event tick, call it again. And we're going to start with a function. Now we're going to make this function here and then we'll collapse it in a second. We want to start by getting our camera manager. And what this does is it will get the camera that is owned by this player index. In our case, it is in solo, it's not multiplayer, so that means it will always get the first player or our third person character, sorry. It will get the camera on it. So this is in essence the same as saying our, for instance, get owner, because we know that our owner is the player, and saying get components by class and looking for a camera component. This is in essence the same thing here, if you have a guarantee that this is the player. So from this, we're going to get actor location. So we just get actor location because it's considered an actor here instead of a component. So it's not get world location, but get actor, but it does the same thing. Then we're going to call line trace by channel from this. And this is going to be the starting point, is where the camera is, obviously. And for the endpoint, we're not just going to get the forward vector of the camera, because obviously we want to use the mouse. So to use the mouse, we're going to get our player controller again. And we're going to call convert mouse location to world space. And so what this does is it gives us the direction. We're going to multiply this by what we'll consider our range. So right click, convert it to a float, and we'll say 2000. Obviously you're free to change this if you want to make it longer or shorter, it's up to you. Now we can't just plug this in directly to end, because this is a direction and that means it would be 0, 0 here. So we want to make sure we get our start, add our direction with the distance to the end. So this should be the result you get. Now this is going to be turned into a function, so we want to reroute our out, our return value, and select everything, right click, collapse the function, and call this LineTraceFromMouse. And so if we try this, so just remove this for now and just open it up for a second just so we can make sure we debug it, because right now if we run it, nothing will happen. So draw debug for duration, sorry, not duration, one frame, because this is called every frame. Compile, and let's try it. So right here, as you can see, it is actually doing something. And we're going to change that in a second, because we don't want it to do that when we're not actually doing it, when we're not in our mouse visible. But if we press tab, it follows the mouse, and that's the whole point. We want to have it do exactly this. So if we now close that, let's just make it so that it only happens when we actually want to use our UI. So we can actually delete these, we don't need those. So what we can do is we can actually get our player controller again and say get mouse cursor. And if it is visible on true, then we'll say we want to line trace. So compile and save. So now we don't have that line trace appearing. But the second we press tab, it appears, and we can actually hover any location as long as it's not too far. Here we can't reach because it's further than 2000, but if we bring it a bit closer, it reappears. The next step is we need to handle this information. Now, we can't do that within here, and the reason we can't do it within here is because sometimes we're going to just line trace and handle the information differently. For instance, when we hover and start dragging, we're going to need to perform a little line trace just to get some extra information, because we're not going to keep passing the out hit through all our functions. So what we're going to do is we're going to reroute both of these. We're going to right click and then collapse the function again, and we'll say handle hit or trace hit, sorry. There we go. So plug both of these in here. So this will be our in hit, and this will be our blocking hit. There you go. So let's go. So let me just remove this to the top here. So the first thing we want to check for is if we have a blocking hit. So search for blocking hit, because if it isn't, then there's no point in checking anything. It means it can't be an item, because the item can't just be an overlap. It needs to be a block. Next, we're going to save our hit actor. So get our in hit here, break it, and with the actor, we're going to promote it to a variable. So we're going to say promote to local variable here, L_hit actor. Plug this into the true, and just hide this because we only need a bit of the information here. We're going to start with 3 sequences. First one is going to be here, second one a bit further, and the third one a bit further as well. So at the first part of the sequence, we're going to check if our hit actor is an inventory. So the way we do that is we get our hit actor, we check get component by class, and we check whether our AC inventory right here is 3D. If it has this component, then we know we have an inventory. And so with that, so right here, we're going to check if it's valid first, promote this here. Then we get to say with a reroute that this is a local inventory, that it's a inventory we are hovering. So L_hovering inventory. And true. Now, if it's false, we're going to reroute again, because even though this may not be true, we can still overlap something else. Maybe we're overlapping the actual item. So to do that, we're going to check, well, exactly that. We're going to get our hit actor. What we're doing here, I just realized what we're doing. So what we're doing in this segment here, this whole sequence, is to find if we are hovering an inventory. And so the way we do that, there's 2 ways. So first is we're hovering an inventory directly. So our mouse is on the actual slots themselves and it's an inventory. But if we're hovering the item itself, it doesn't have this component, but it can still be a part of an inventory. So to check that, we get our item hit. We get our owner of the item hit, because when an item spawns in inventory or is placed in inventory, we tell it that its owner is the inventory. So if the inventory is valid, so if its owner is valid, that means that the item is within an inventory. So if this is false, right here, that means that the item is on the floor, and in which case we don't care. We're not overlapping an inventory then, or we're not hovering an inventory. So copy this on isValid only. We can then say, well, get components by class, because now we know that it has an owner, and that owner is most likely an inventory. So we're going to look for inventory 3D. And if it has that component, that means that we are once again hovering an inventory. So hovering inventory gets set to the value right here. And to be fair, rename this to new inventory. There we go. So that does it for the first section, where we determine if we have a new inventory. So if we have a new inventory, we want to get here, right click, convert to validated. And the reason we do this is so that we can tell if we entered a new inventory, just so that we have an event that gets called saying we just entered the inventory. So to do this, we're going to need a new variable here. So we're going to promote this to a normal variable right here. So promote to variable, and this will be called hovering inventory. and that is exactly what it is. It is the current inventory that is being hovered by the mouse. So if these two right here are different, so our hovering inventory and our new one, if they are different, that means we hovered or entered a new inventory and we can actually do something different. So right here, right here. What this will do is we're going to make a new reroute here. We're going to add our new hovering inventory reroute, and we're just going to select, oh, we don't actually need this. Just select this, right click, collapse the function, and this will be called start hover inventory. There we go. So this is the new inventory we start to hover. We call this on true. And the reason we do it this way and not just directly just call it is because otherwise we would end up calling it every tick, and that would be a waste because you only enter the inventory once. Now, if it's false, we want to check if our hovering inventory is valid. And the reason we do that is because if we don't have a new inventory we're hovering and there was one valid before, that means we have exited the inventory. We are now either hovering nothing or we're hovering an item that is on the floor. So we'll then call a function called stop hovering inventory. So we will call from here a reroute, right click, collapse the function, stop hover inventory. And I'm actually going to add a spacebar between all of these. So for stop, we'll just get hovering inventory and put on is valid specifically. And because we know this is no longer valid, we'll put it to empty. So set it to nothing. Now, on our second sequence here, we're going to look at calling a hover item. Are we hovering an item? So the way we check that is with a branch. So put a branch here, although at the bottom we'll just give it enough space that it's easy to handle. We're going to get our hit actor again. We're going to check, does object implement interface? Does it implement our BPI share? If it does, then we have hit an item. If our actor hit is an AC inventory, this won't trigger because we're not hovering an item, we're hovering the inventory directly. But if this triggers here, then that means we're hovering an item. So, and it's an item within the inventory, but we can also have items separate. So if this item here is true, then we're going to check the same thing as before. Do we have a hovering item here? So we're going to promote this to a variable, and it's just an actor. And it's going to be called hovering item, and specifically item. So don't have this set here. If they're different, same trick as before, hovering item right here. If they're different, then that means that we just started hovering a brand new item. So we want to make sure we can call events for this. So we will have a new function for lhit item, reroute, select it, right click, collapse the function, start hover item, and plug this in right here. And there we go. Now we're going to duplicate this because we're going to have stop obviously as well. So stop hover item, close it. And same trick, if our hovering item here, so drag it in, right click, convert to validated. If this is valid and we didn't hit something that is an item, then that means that we are no longer hovering an item. So we'll call stop hover item right here and call hovering item as the input. Now in this case, we set hovering item to false within here. Okay, so let's get the last step right here with our last sequence. So in here, we're going to start with a branch. What this branch is going to need is it's going to need a extra variable here. So duplicate our hovering item, and we'll call this dragging item. And we're going to make a small macro right here called is dragging. And all it does is check if this dragging item is valid. So is valid right here and into the output right here. Now we're just going to add a compact node called is dragging so it looks a bit nicer. So close this and pull it in here, and it should look like this. Now the basic gist here is we're going to handle movement here because we're handling the trace, and what that means is we get our hits. So in hit, we then get our impact point, so break right here, and our impact point is going to be promoted to a variable here, which we'll call L underscore impact point. So plug this in like this. And then we're going to get our dragging item, and we're just going to say set actor location. And the location will be obviously our impact point. There we go. And we need a bit more space, I think, here. Yeah, so I'm just going to drag this a bit further and just move it all down a bit. Now I'm also going to add one extra thing here, even though we're not going to use it or set it up just yet. We're going to make a new system or another one of these. So B is dragging duplicate and called B is in inventory. And what this does is it checks, are we hovering in inventory, by just replacing our dragging item here by hovering inventory. If it's valid, we are. If not, we're not. So B is dragging inventory, branch, plug it in here, and there we go. For now, we're not going to do anything, but what this is going to do pretty much is going to be update drag in inventory, update in the world, because those are two different things. We need to make sure we handle them differently. That does it for handle hit. We're just going to make some very quick tweaks here, because otherwise we won't really be able to test it. So, okay, so for now, we're just going to go and say start hover is going to be set our hovering item to be the new input. And in the case of the stop hover item, it's going to be the opposite. So we're going to say hovering item is just going to be empty. And for start hover inventory, same thing. The inventory gets set to our item here. And for dragging, obviously, we're not going to set that up just yet. We're going to do that in the next part. So stop hover doesn't need to have this because we're going to do it somewhere else. So it only gets ordered here anyway for now. So right here, to test things out, let's just go and add in our inventory. You know what? First, we will check. We'll just do it outside. So here, we'll say print, and we'll say hovering inventory. Here, we're going to say, copy paste it, sorry, hovering inventory via item. And so if this one doesn't get called when we test it, that means that I haven't set it up. And so we'll just go and we'll do that as well if that happens. So let's just test this one first. So if we compile, save, and play, if we go in tab, we now have our mouse, and here it says hovering inventory. Now it's spamming it, so that's not correct. We should have not, shouldn't do that. It should only do it once when we enter. So let's see why it's doing that. Oh no, sorry. The reason it's doing this is indeed correct. It's because it's saying, oh, well, we have a new inventory. But if we go here and just say that we started, it should only happen once. I'm actually going to, yeah. So if we try again, let's see. Yeah, hovering inventory happens once. If we move out and move back in, it happens again. If we hover the same items, it doesn't actually disappear, but it's just spamming this. So this is working. So let's remove that. Check again. If we hover inventory on an item, it should still apply as well. So if we go over these items, it works the same as if we hover the inventory itself. If we go to the next inventory, it realizes it's switched. It's not the same one, so it recalls the information. And if we exit, same thing. Okay, so our hovering inventory works. Let's try stop hovering. Most likely does work as well. Let's give it a quick test. So we enter, we leave, we enter again, we leave to the next one. So that doesn't get called for some reason. Why is that? So our hovering inventory should be valid here. Let's print this to see if it's false. So false. Let's see. So it's getting triggered on tick, so this doesn't really help too much. So right here, it should be true normally. And if we hover to here, it should be true as well. Okay, so let's just try something. If we exit our mouse from the bottom, we leave. And here we enter and we leave again. So it does understand that we are leaving. Why is it not triggering when we overlap two of them? I think I know what's happening. So the reason is because it is going here. And it is saying that they are different. Sorry, no, wait. Okay, sorry, I made a little bit of a mistake. So So right here, this does work. But what's happening is right here, it's saying this is getting called for two scenarios. In the first scenario, it's saying, oh, well, hovering inventory is empty. Because let's say you just started the game, you haven't hovered an inventory yet. So it's empty, meaning it is different from the one we just hovered. So true, start hover. Perfect, no problem. But if this inventory is different from this one, just normally, because like there we hover from one to the other, it is different. It's starting hover, but it's never saying stop. So it should. So the way we do a solution for that, it's very simple. Move this a bit to the side, get our hovering inventory, copy it, right click and convert to validated. This way we can check whether it is because it exists or because it is non-valid. If it's non-valid, then we just call start hover. But if it is valid, we want to make sure we say stop hover the old one, so right here, and we can set the new one to be the new one right after. So make sure you have this reroute like this. And so now we should get the same result. And in this case, we don't need the hovering inventory again set to false because it's getting reset right here. So if we play, and actually we don't test it, so let's just print this here. So this is if we swap, so we'll call this swap instead. And so here, if we pass here, it should, there we go, call swap. So it's a very tiny angle there. If we go here, it literally leaves for like a second and then just goes back in, so it doesn't work. So, but if we swap here, it works just fine. So that does it, that works just fine. Next, let's try hovering the item. So print string hover item. And right here, we will say unhover. So unhover item. Go. So let's go and we get hover item. If we move to the next one, hover item again. Hover item again, and obviously it's not calling unhover, same problem as before, because if we exit it works, but if we hover from one to the other, it doesn't understand the difference. So same trick as before, we're going to move this a bit further. We are going to check here with our hovering item, right click to convert to validated, put it on true, and if it's not valid, we start hover again, no problem. If it is, we want to copy our stop, place it on is valid, and then add a reroute to reconnect it here, and we are done. So this will fix that little issue, and we can remove hover item, we can remove unhover, and we can compile. Now, there is still a little issue here. If we write, let's say, a print here, if we do this, and we press tab, we're gonna get hello all the time. And yes, it's good because we want to untick, we want to be able to move all the time, but at the same time, we don't need to perform all these checks every frame. It's not useful. But the only way we can actually tell it to not do that is to tell it, well, only do it every now and then. And what we're going to do is we're going to tell it, well, if you're hovering the same item, don't do the checks again, because it's not necessary, because everything we do is based on the item that we hit. We can just say, well, if the previous item hit on the last tick is the same as the one hit now, it doesn't matter. So the way we're going to do that is very, very simple. We're just going to delete this. We're going to make a new variable, which is going to be called item hit. And it's going to be an actor. So look for actor right here. And this is just going to be used for this event tick. It's just going to be used to make it so that it's lighter, so it doesn't have to run all the time. So we're going to add a tiny sequence here like this. It's going to have a branch. And sorry, not a branch. It's simply going to set our hit item to our hit item, hit actor, sorry. So change this to hit actor, sorry, not item. So we set our hit actor at the end of our sequence here, and the rest of the sequence just goes here. So make sure this has to be at the end because we don't want to do it before. Actually, to be fair, it doesn't really matter. We can just put this here now I think about it, because it's not used, we're not actually using it. So what we want to do is we want to check how hit actor is it different from our local hit actor. If these are different, then we want to keep going. Otherwise, we'll just ignore the whole logic here. So let's just run this on true. And so it won't change anything visually. We won't see any difference in the line trace. But if we now do print here instead, it should not be doing every frame a print, but only every time we move. So if we press tab, it says hello. If we now hover, let's say an item, it will say hello. If we hover a different piece in the environment, same, but it is now a lot less than it was before. It is going to be less demanding in performance, even though to be fair, it isn't that demanding to start with, but it's always better to optimize where you can, especially this. It's such an easy fix, so might as well do it. And obviously, if we go into our inventory, our items, they're all separate objects or actors, so there's no issue. It can tell the difference. Now, if you want to be very, very precise, let's say, and in our case, it never happens, it's not necessary, but if you have different hit components, then you might also want to add a hit component check as well. Save the hit component, same trick, works just the same. So I think that's gonna cover it for this part. So it's all the basic interaction of hovering with the mouse, moving the mouse, displaying the information that we need. In the next part, we're probably going to cover opening the inventory and maybe some extra little bits. I did say part 7 would be the last part, but I think it's going to take a lot longer than expected. So instead of just doing the usual like 2-hour part, I want to try doing this in smaller segments. So this is probably 30 minutes, maybe a bit more. Next part will probably be the same, but I'm going to try and release them a day apart instead of the usual week that I usually do. And the last bonus part will be the same, but starting a week from now. So thank you for watching. This part will be, as usual, available on Patreon if you are interested. Thank you to everybody who's supporting me on Patreon. I will see you all in the next part a lot sooner than usual. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.